Welcome to the No Script Show. As mentioned in our last video, we wanted to explore the recent trend for Bento Grid web designs, in particular, whether it has the potential to make building websites a bit easier with HTML and CSS. This is slightly different to our last website redesign videos. For this one, we're not taking an existing site, but making one up to use as a starting point for future website designs. I'm joined, as always, by David Wormsley. How you doing, David?
Hello. Yeah, I'm really good. Yeah, so this is a bit of a break for what we're trying to do, but I sort of had it in my mind. I need this actually in my personal life. I need to learn how to make kind of bento grid type sites because I think it's going to help me, which we'll discuss. We might as well bring the screen up actually because we've got some bullet points, haven't we, about what we are going to discuss.
Surely can do that. Yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
And then I don't have to see my ugly face. But yeah, so we're going to, in a way, this episode is going to be like the other ones where we did a bit of a look at the design. So we'll talk about Bento Boxes, and then we'll look a little bit at the code challenges of using those sites and what I think is exciting about it. And that's it, really. I think it's just going back to why we started this show. Partly it was so we would catch up on what's changed on the web platform, particularly with CSS, but also there's that sort of intrigue about the indie web, I think, as well. This idea of getting back to the early days, which we remember when you read a book on HTML and CSS and build your own site. You weren't dependent on a corporate entity to help you do that. So I'm quite interested in that. So maybe Bento Grids could take us one step towards that. I don't know.
Do you feel there's any need at this point to explain to anybody listening what a Bento Grid is?
Yeah, well, that's a good thing, actually. I should have got this up, but I do have.
Perfect.
Shall I just have a quick look at this article here?
Yeah.
It's good.
So this is on, what's website is this on?
Medium.
Yeah, it's a Medium. And I presumably in the YouTube show notes, we'll link to this, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a nice little article here, which is very positive about this. What is a trend which is taken from Japan, as they're showing here. It's this compartmentalization of different food items. So that's where the inspiration comes. It talks about the root of it. And I think it's funny, you made some notes on my comments where you were saying it's a little bit back to those early Windows. So Windows, you could say, I think Windows 8.
I think it was maybe Windows 8 or something like that. We went from, I don't know if you remember, but everything became like these tiles, either squares or rectangles. And it was a very, maybe featured, I don't know, as a sort of theme. But it really took over Windows. And at the time, it was a really inspirational design. And then they launched a mobile phone operating system, which did the same thing. Everything was this series of tiles, some of which were interactive, many of which were image-based, some of were just text-based, but everything ultimately fit inside the rectangle of either the monitor or the handheld device that you had, the phone. But everything was either full width or 2/3 width or 1/3 width or a quarter width, and everything together made this nice jigsaw puzzle fill up the whole screen. It was really nice. And I remember thinking at the time that was really inspirational and revolutionary. And now, of course, I know it as bento, which I think comes from sushi, doesn't it? Isn't it some reference to the way that you serve food? You get these bowls, don't you? Which
well, that's the picture on the top. Let me just have a look on there.
Oh, there you go.
So you little boxes where you can compartmentalize the little food items you have. So that's kind of the traditional, whether from Japanese culture. But yeah, you're right with the Windows. I think it's fascinating because it's also, it was that Windows and having those little boxes as a design for the operating system was the thing. They also very much helped to promote CSS Grid as well.
Right.
And then you've got, of course, Apple, because they've been using Bento Boxes a lot on their websites at various different stages as well. So obviously they have a big impact on, how the rest of us think of design. So yeah, so we've seen a lot of it, and there's a few examples here, and we've done our own sort of mock-up thing.
Well, we haven't. You have.
I have. Yeah. So I've made this sort of not very good site here, but this is a sort of starting point, and we'll talk about some of the code here. And I did just before that do that. This is a little bit more complex, and I realized this is quite tricky to achieve all these little boxes the way they're lined up, but we'll talk about that in a moment. But just as an idea of putting things in the boxes. So that's what we mean by Bento's boxes. Should we go back to the notes actually?
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So we put down here some questions to ask ourselves. Firstly, on the design side of things, so is it a fad that's it's going to look jaded in a couple of years?
Do you know what? I have an opinion on this, and the answer I think is yes. And the reason I think it's yes is, can you just go back to your design? And I'm not picking holes in your design because I think it's actually really
No?
fabulous. Yeah, perfect. I think it's the rounded corners only which make that design possibly, have some sort of age to it. I think if you looked at that in 5 years' time, those whole rounded corners, they come and they go, and they come and they go, and they were popular,
Yeah.
then not, and then popular again, and then not. That's the only thing. But I think the overall structure of it, no. But I think the individual, I don't know, the typography, the rounded corners, the way that the background gradients may work, that could change. But the overall, here's a rectangle next to another rectangle next to another rectangle, I don't think that will be something that goes out of fashion. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think we can tell it's interesting for me because I've been looking at what has been. There's lots of articles on Bento's box and the style and that, and there's collections of designs, and it's really interesting because there's very few that are using it throughout the whole page, and they're not all rounded as well, and there's lots of different styles. So for me, I take a different. I've even writing some notes here. I think it might live on. The guy I think who wrote that article, which I just showed,
Uh-huh.
seems to think it's bigger. And I think it's bigger because it's about layout more than it is about aesthetics. So the
Right.
aesthetics, as we see some glass morphism being applied to it. If I just go back to this article, they're all rounded corners. Let's have a look at another example. So no, it's not really glass, but they're all rounded corners, aren't they?
Yeah,
Uh,
but but they're it's hard to see the rounded corners, if you know what I mean.
yeah,
And it may be that the rounded corners right now look great, but I just anticipate that in the future they might not look great. Maybe they will. Maybe forevermore they will look great. But also, there's the option here to, if you go back, like that one, that dark one there
yeah.
is a perfect example. It probably has got rounded corners, but they're so
Mm,
subtle that you can't see them. And in effect, you've kind of got rid of the background. It's very, very subtle. The fact that
mm,
each, let's call it a card, each box
mm,
has a border at all or a different background color. And it just occurred to me that really you could just make that all the same color as the background, and it would still work as a design. They don't need to be cards in that sense of the word. They could just be all on a perfectly white background, and I think the design would still work. Maybe you just have borders left and right, for example, to separate the different sections in a row. But the columns, sorry, to separate the columns in a row. But do you understand what I'm saying? The fact that
mm.
it doesn't have to look like a card, and you don't have to go with each card as a separate color. Whereas the design that you've got, that's quite an opinionated thing, isn't it? You've gone for a different color in each card. And yeah, I don't know if there's any wisdom in there, but hopefully some of that came from.
Yeah, I think some of it is coming because I put the note here that it's not really clear cut when what is and what isn't Bento's design in a
Mm,
way. If you
mhm.
take the rounded corners off, you go back to Windows, which sort of set it
Yeah,
off with those clear angle boxes.
yeah.
But also, I think it may be to do with. Well, let's have a look. I wrote down what other people and I came up with, as well as what I thought were the design solutions. That is more flexibility with the branding and responsive design. I think the responsive design element is kicking hard on this idea that more people are looking at one column anyway of lots of bits of content. So on a regular site where you've got this maybe image left, text right, and
Yeah.
then reverse on the next line, well, it's maybe all with the same background as you go down. When you go down to a mobile, let's just have a look here. So if I take this down to a mobile, you do have, let's just take that down a bit more. you do have a little compartmentalization, which you
Yeah.
wouldn't have.
No, that's right. It would just look like one long screed, wouldn't it? That's only the headings or the images themselves would give it away. Interesting.
Yes, and this is, I mean, this is only using 2 breakpoints here, but the idea that you could do a different arrangement and change the grid,
The grid
I think.
itself so that things slot into an actual different part of the viewport. Okay, yeah.
Yes. And also our move towards trying to be responsive in our little components as well. I think there's been a big move to it. So I think this sort of why I think it might stay around is because in a way it's a kind of fresh approach, if you like, to thinking about the new demands that the web has with so many different viewport sizes to have to deal with now, this sort of 2000
Yep,
unique
yep.
viewport sizes. So I think it just, it's more than that, because of course, if you strip away the rounded corners and the colors, I mean, you can't tell it apart from any other site, or
No,
a lot of them.
no. What I quite like about this, though, again, back to the design,
Yeah,
is the fact that it lends itself really well to like a one pager,
yeah,
because it's got like that atomized. Well, in this case, you're showing like a hair salon or something like that. And it kind of atomizes all the different bits of the business, the About Us page, the hours that were open, a few photographs, there's some information about the location, maybe some testimonials. And each of those kind of fits perfectly into one little box.
yeah.
So for these one pager, we might call them trades websites or brochure website. It's perfect, isn't it? Because you've just got this one little about us section. The areas covered, the services, the images, the phone numbers, and what have you, and they all just fit perfectly inside of each little box. Whether this would work for a, I don't know, a bigger website where there was obviously a requirement for dozens and dozens of pages. I'm not sure you'd want a full website with 100 pages, each of which was a bento design, but it definitely lends itself to a one pager.
Yeah, and I think just going back to that whole idea, I mean, I picked mobile hairdresser because what I noticed, as we've been doing with the other ones, is searching for a site to redesign. And it's just one of those that I thought, do they have many of their own websites? So they don't. In fact, there's a
Mm,
lot of them are joining this syndicate who has a website. You can book various different hairdressers. So they have to kind of join that. They don't have their own personal site. And I think, yeah, those, and handyman is another,
yep.
yeah, example, or handy woman. I don't know if it's sexist at all. I don't think it is to say handyman, is it? But yeah, it's those are kind of businesses. And what I've noticed is why I think I need it is I've had 3 clients with existing sites come to me in roughly the last month or so with new parts of their business which they want to feature quite heavily on their website. And there's not an obvious slot for it.
Yeah.
And you
Yeah.
suddenly think, if I had a Bento's design for all of this, it would be no problem. They get a new box, you know,
Right. Right.
or we'll rearrange the boxes.
And honestly, my interaction with tradespeople is that basically once the site's set up, they're not going to look at it more or less ever again. It really is a conduit for people to get their email address or get the phone number online. But the idea of being, and they certainly wouldn't want a CMS and they wouldn't want to be making changes or anything like that. They just want to set it and forget it. But if they did want to add something in the future, I don't know, Christmas hours or something like that, then it would be easy for them to get in touch with you and say, look, can we just add a new section right at the top about the
Yeah.
Christmas hours? And then on the 1st of December, can you just remove it again? And that whole conversation is really easy because you don't have to think about, okay, do we need a page for this? Where are we going to put it in the menu? It's just all there.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the one that I'm going to have to, how I might redesign it entirely as bento boxes. I mean, Counselor, they've just decided that one of the things that they do, they're not going to do anymore. And that was prominent on their site. It was the right hand side to some other stuff which talked about
Okay.
their rooms that they let, which they also not doing. And you start to remove the whole of the site and other things. You think, I don't know how I would sort of balance it out. So you can have different chunks of content of different sizes
Yeah.
and accommodate those in a
Yeah.
random way. I
That's it.
think you made a good point. You maybe want to make that now about the problems of it. That's
What was I saying? I can't remember what I said.
You said that you lose the hierarchy of information, the
Well, that's
storytelling.
yeah, that's true. I guess if you want to sell or if you want to describe some sort of narrative, I don't know, if you want to tell a story about your business or something like that, this doesn't lend itself to that, does it? Because it is just atomic, atomized little bits of content. It's I don't know, if we go back to your design, the most you see is like 3 or 4 sentences inside of one box, because it just doesn't lend itself. Obviously, if you put some sort of 2, 3, 400-word blog post in one of those boxes, it'll completely mess the design
Yeah.
up, because it'll just go from top to bottom. So you do lose that storytelling aspect. Obviously, in the design that you've got, there is an About Us page. Dare I say it? You could have something akin to a blog, where you have posts that you might add, but it doesn't lend itself well to that. But honestly, I don't want my plumber telling me a story. I just want to know that the plumber is reliable, what their phone number is, and when they're available. So, again, it might fit trades really well.
I think so. I mean, it's one way of being able to start when you haven't got an idea. Because I mean, when I started projects with clients, it's often the way you might you want to get the content off them. They often don't know what to produce. They never had to think about their businesses in this sort of third party way on how their audience might. And it's very easy. It's happened so many times and still is happening as they change, that they forget something that's major. And you've lined everything up in this format that sort of you think is prioritizing the hierarchy and telling a sort of story with all their different services. And then they throw in this curveball and you're kind of back to it. And I think maybe you're right. If you're somebody trying to sell a single product, I was looking at a site actually by somebody you interviewed recently,
Oh, yeah.
selling new static hosting service. And
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
looking at their beautiful website, but I looked at it and thought, effectively their website, apart from a few instances, it's beautifully styled, great typography, but basically it's one column. They
Yeah.
just tell a
Yeah.
story down one column
Yeah.
with different sections. Um, and I think, yes, if you've got something like that, this would be a terrible way to approach it. But I think most of the businesses who don't get online so easily because it's either too expensive or, it's very hard for them to deal with a designer, you could get them on board a lot easier by you could just say, okay, well, we don't need all of these pages. We can start with just the boxes here. And then if you've got pages that can express more about it, then we can add in little, as a lot of them do, little learn mores or little buttons to go through forward to something else.
Right. Right.
And
Yeah. Yep.
sorry, I'm going on, but I just thought, I mean, I stuck a menu in here in the traditional way because I'm thinking, I never thought about this before with headers. If you put them in the little boxes, they are. And this, if you didn't have other pages because you've got nothing, you could just fill this in with anything relevant
Yeah,
to
yeah,
your
you
business,
really could. You could put another image
which
in there or anything. I guess you've got to
exactly,
worry
which I was
about
playing
the sort of flow of it, don't you? In that, you want salient information that's incredibly important toward the top, like you've done there with the email address and the telephone number and things like that, and other things come down later.
Mm,
But
mm,
also, it just speaks to where maybe the client doesn't really have a lot to say about what they do. The assumption is that what they do is sort of fairly
yeah.
self-explanatory. In the case of a mobile hairdresser, honestly, how many million things can you tell me about what you do? Not many, probably, and the same would be true for all sorts of industries. And so this works perfectly. We don't have a lot of content. We just want a presence. One question maybe that comes from this is, you've got to make decisions about the order of it. On a
Yeah.
desktop, what comes at the top? Obviously, you've gone for the logo, if you like, plus the phone and the menu and the
Yeah.
email address, and then we're into about and areas and what have you. And I guess you'll decide how that collapses onto a mobile device. Pricing and testimonials and things like that come later. But also the SEO and the accessibility piece as well have to be considered, because if you're going for this minimal site with lots of, well, very, very little in the way of text-based content, then I guess the SEO piece is going to be interesting.
I think that, I'm quite interested in the idea of being able to get this kind of design here. So this is the idea, just to get this prototype. This isn't a very good design at
Yeah,
all.
yeah,
I'd,
yeah, I
and
get it. Yeah,
yeah, it's sort of done in a day and conceived. But yeah, to get this kind of approach to doing it. But I often thought about, you could tell a lot of stories in those boxes. So,
yeah,
on other sites, you'll put a video in one of those boxes that maybe pop out. And if you do want more content, I was thinking about this. I can bring something up. I don't know if it'll come up well. This is somebody else's work I was looking at. If I open this up, I'll have
okey
to
doke.
bring it over here.
Yeah, that's fine.
You could put things in boxes like here and give more text in
Oh,
this
that's
kind of thing.
interesting. So it's like a slider, but with like a
Yeah.
Bento menu. Oh, that is nice.
So I was thinking about that kind of thing that you could add as little components to this idea.
Yeah, the perfect one that's jumping out there is the services menu that's on the bottom left of the screen, hair coloring and then a little bit of information about that, the highlights. So I like that UX. I don't know what the accessibility piece would be around it, but I do like what you just showed me. That's cool. I like that a lot.
Yeah, I think you need a bit of JavaScript really to make sure when you've got tabs that it's
Yeah.
accessible.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah, it's just something to build on. So I just thought maybe we can do a whole bunch of designs trying to get this. Let me have a look. We've probably been rabbiting on for some time. I think the problems are, it's interesting. You say about the hierarchy of information, but it's a Japanese culture like this. And I maybe mentioned this before, I watched a great video by a Japanese designer saying, well, she started really with why does I think it's Yahoo website, because it's quite popular over there, looks
Okay.
so cram-packed full of all sorts of stuff there. And she was explaining that in an Eastern culture, there's an honesty in slapping everything you have open to everybody for them to choose. Where in a Western
Oh,
culture, we say we want it prioritized into an order so we can take one bit of information. But from an Eastern cultural thing, it seems almost like you're hiding, like you're in a way you are when you're storytelling. You're trying to carry people along the journey you want them to go on, aren't you?
gosh,
When
that's
you
interesting and
slap the
quite
information up there,
profound. Yeah.
yeah, yes. So, I think it could be seen as more positive, perhaps, by Eastern cultures, according to this one designer. But it made a lot of sense to me that, in fact, it's true. I'm in India myself, and I look at a lot of Indian sites, and they tend to be fairly chaotic in my terms
Yeah.
about the information they share. But maybe it just kind of seems more up there and honest. It's all
Yeah, that's
slapped there for
fascinating.
you.
That's really interesting, and I've never thought about that. But okay, okay, all right, I'll
Yeah,
bank that one away.
I think the accessibility and issues are in there in the sense that you can easily, and this is what I want to avoid doing. I mean, I'm I'm reading a book and following a course to try and improve on this, so I'll probably alter things. But I tried to keep within the semantics. So there was a header, which is called a header. There is a footer that's called a footer, and in the main, I still think it's quite. You really only got sections which
I was going
don't
to say,
have
are
a.
you just adopting these as sections then? Yeah.
Well, I've just put them as plain divs because in accessibility terms, sections and divs are both fairly meaningless. Sections
Uh-huh.
are true; they can help people, but a section must have a heading. So some of them would have to be plain divs. But also, you could count some of these as asides or complementary as well. So
Yeah.
I think with this layout, if you're aware of these things, I mean, I think it would probably make me a little bit more inclined to be more accessible. I'd be thinking, is this box on the side? Is this box complementary? Is it a div? Is it a section? Where with a lot of the designs, I just go straight for a main section. If it's got a header, it's a section. I don't
Got
even
it.
think about it as much.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah. So I might go into reverse on that. Should we talk about the code?
Okay, well, you're gonna have to show us things, aren't you? You're gonna have to crack open the IDE, I guess.
Yeah. Well, first thing that I liked about it, we talked about Cube CSS before, where you separate out your sort of CSS into uh, um, the structure, which is the composition,
Uh-huh.
and then you have these sort of blocks, is where you're starting these blocks, and it sort of fits nicely into that arrangement. So I like that, but I like the fact that you can arrange the code in little sections if you mark it up. So that was it. Let me just have a look. So the interesting things to explore, I need to come back to this because we miss things. So, well, one is, let me just try and set this up. So I'm trying to set up something which someone else can take and use. So I'm using, here's the site on VS Code.
Are you able to increase your font size on that? I don't know if
I
you
am.
yeah, that
What I
might be
get,
helpful. It might interrupt things, I guess. And I mean in the yeah,
that's
that's maybe spoiled it a bit, has it? Is that gonna
that's okay. We'll look at it in
sure.
mobile
Okay.
view for the
Okay.
moment. Um, So yeah, so we've got the CSS in here, and it's sort of sectioned out as I discussed before, and other stuff into the sort of composition, the structural stuff, and the block stuff, which is there. So that's kind of the same thing. Sorry, I'll have to go back to my notes. I forgot what I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
Find a replace. Oh yeah. So what I wanted to do here. So if we go into composition, okay, I don't want that there. You can tell I'm not an experienced person with this one. open up all sorts of wrong things here. I
That's all
also
right.
need to open up this in order so live server can kick in so we can see it there.
Perfect.
Perfect. Yeah. So what I've started doing with this is to arrange the composition. Let's just go down. Oops, let's go to where I've put the bento stuff. Here, so I'm using the
Yep.
same technique where we can, so this is all the stuff that's in the home main section, which is all our boxes below the header.
Okay.
And I'm organizing them with these grid template areas here to do this. What I thought was quite cool, if you don't use the word card-1 or any variation of that, what you could simply do is to make it easy for someone else, if they wanted to maintain it, is to just do a find and replace on this. So if you go into edit, you've got this replace. So if I just take this and we decide that box has a particular name, you
Yeah.
can go into replacing the files, find all of the places where that's mentioned. It's not mentioned much, but if it's in multiple files, and then just replace that with the actual name for what your box is. So
Oh,
if that
okay.
box is the about box or the about card, or it's the, whatever it is down here, the prices. So you could let this set out quite nicely. So I've set that up first. That's the thing. Interestingly enough, there is another approach you could go to make this a whole lot easier. I mean, I think that's fairly easy to understand when you're coding this up rather than having to talk in positions,
Mhm.
with grid. There is something, and I'll go back to my notes here, which is I'm going to experiment with it, and I will put it up where this is on GitHub. And that is using this auto
Auto
it's kind of,
flow.
auto placement with auto flow. And I've got an example of it because I put it up on here. I don't know how well this would work. This is the problem with accessibility and order the DOM. You can't do it. So my example over here is down bottom there. So this would be effectively one line of code, the one that makes the auto grids.
Mhm.
But in it, you would have to set that some things were to span 2 columns, some things were to be tall,
Yep.
probably span 2. And you could arrange your grid. Now, the beauty of this is there's no responsive stuff. Once you said this grid box needs to be too wide or too tall or whatever it is, then it will do the auto placement for you.
Yeah, that's quite nice, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's an accessibility nightmare if they need to be in order. And you can imagine if you've got a lot of links in places and someone's having to tab to those links, they can go in a order. There is a plan to solve this by being able to sort of connect this with what's in the DOM. So it will be less confusing. I'm not sure how that's going to work out, but this is a cheap way of being able to do bento grids.
Does that design, just out of interest, in the way that you've implemented it there, does that qualify, and I don't know if this is a silly question, as bento? Because when you collapsed it, so at the minute everything
Yeah.
aligns, okay, so there's one exception, that's the one. Yeah. So for example, some of them are no longer the same height as the other ones. There's no standardization of height. It wraps to the content itself. Whereas my impression of bento was that there was always a standard height so that looks more masonry, if you know what I mean, for want of a better
Yes.
word. Is that true of bento design? Does it always have, like, okay, if it's this high, it's always this high? And if if the content itself makes it taller, the other ones should also adopt that same height, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Well, we're always trying to get some intrinsic values for this. So with
Mm,
grid, we've got the FR unit, which
yeah.
it gives you a fraction of the space you've got available, or auto, where it's calculating that within the con. So all of that was on auto in the sense of setting out those things. So it was acting like masonry because it was where the where the content could wrap, it would
Yeah,
wrap.
yeah, 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 yeah.
But effectively, the same thing is happening on all of this. It's all having to get squeezed out of its proportions to some degree, depending on how I've set it.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
Yeah, that was an aside. I'm sorry. I sort of
no, it's a good one, really. I mean, on this, I haven't. They're all set to. So this is the interesting thing on this. Why I think this is difficult, and why that first when I was doing it in Figma, I was putting lots of little boxes, and then I had 2 boxes, and then 3, and then something was
Hmm.
going down the side. That becomes quite difficult because then you have to calculate how many sort of grids you're going to need to do.
Yeah.
So even on this design here with it, just to get these 2 like this, because this you can't see it so well over here. I wonder if I can shrink this. I've never tried to shrink. No, I can't shrink this one
Yeah,
without.
you might have to reduce the font size for us all.
But
Yep.
yeah, if I just go back down there. So I want this one to go down here, but I've had to give them sort of 2 cards, if you like. Card 3 is repeated twice because I need to have 6 to make the whole grid
Yeah, I get it.
layout work.
Yeah.
So when you get more complex with it, you get to 12, you can end up
You're
to
right.
24. And maybe at that point, laying things out, this isn't as simple. But otherwise, this is quite simple because you could just simply, I mean, if it's really simple as 1, then you could just shift them around. But it's pretty easy to just move these to the position that you want them to go.
Yep. Yep. Okay.
Well, let me go back.
Go back to your code. Go back to your Google Doc.
Yeah. So that we talked about that. Relative colors. Now, this is really interesting. We touched on this on that vet site.
Oh, I
that
love
we did
this.
the
This
first
is
time.
so nice. Yeah.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it's the future or whether it'll get solved. There are 2 people to follow on this one. I think Matthias Ott and Adam Argyle in particular from Chrome, who's been looking into relative colors, and I'm struggling to get it. But it's a cool idea for the
It
idea
is.
of having a starting point. Let me just go and bring it up. It is in, get back to it, into our globals. I set my colors.
Yeah, there it is.
So
Yeah.
yeah. So if we look at the color scheme here, so I've been experimenting with this. So this is just the standard variables that I've set up here. If I just go and comment this out, oops, I'll not do it like that.
Yeah, that was not commenting. That was deleting.
No,
Yeah.
no, we've lost all of our comments there. Let me bring this one in. Now we've got a different color scheme here, a more muted color scheme. But what's interesting is there's only one color being used here. So if I go into the brand,
Oh,
here,
this is so cool. I love this.
we can kind of change our whole thing. So we see I haven't gone too far overboard with the changing of the colors, but you'll see they're all changing to a sort of complementary color. Now this works fine if you stick within the same sort of hue because of our background. If we start to go a little bit crazy off into some really dark colors,
Okay, then it really, yeah. Okay.
well, the background can start to get too dark, or
Yeah.
you can get.
Do you want
contrast.
to explain how that's working, though? How you go from the brand color down to all of the different, the tertiary, the secondary, the accent?
Yeah. So, and this is what we can do now. What relative colors allows us to do is it allows us to pick a color palette. In this case, I'm just using this one. There are better color palettes now, which are more visually match what people see rather than technically how the color wheel moves.
Mhm.
But I'm not using it in this case. But basically, when we've got HSL, which is hue, saturation, and lightness, is our 3 values, I can separate these out and put in a calc on them. So I take this one, so I take the variable, the brand here with its color, it gets pulled over here. And then I say, I want to calculate the hue of this one to be 140 on the wheel plus 140. So it moves around. It should have been 180, shouldn't it? Oh no, that's the other one, the other color, to give it a different thing there. And then also, if I want the saturation, I can take that down a little bit for this particular thing. And then I'm leaving the lightness.
Left the yellow. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so that's working for all of them. So this one, the secondary color should be a complementary color, this one, to this color on the wheel in that particular color mode. So I just think it's really cool that you can set these up. And
It's brilliant. It's really clever. I love it.
On the vet site, I mean, the problem is at the moment, I think there's 89% global support for it. So that's a lot of people to lose to use it. But I've included it here. I've actually put it into effect. I didn't do it on the vet site. Let me just go back to what we had before and comment this out.
So now you're back to, you've declared everything as an actual value rather than...
Yeah, so everything says a value. But where I had the problem, I did those little bento boxes and I did a light and a dark contrasting mode. And I said I didn't finish it off very well because they had a sort of technique, and I can just go to that by going into block here. Let's just go. You can see this is on the live site, so it's telling me to update to
That's all right.
To GitHub. So I'll go into block, and this is getting a little bit waffly, Nathan, because I'm going off in different.
It's all right. We're sticking with you, David.
Okay, so somewhere I think I'll put them at the top there. Yeah, the homepage bentos are here. So I'm using that effect here to add in, because I don't have an alpha as part of my color palette. And I want this alpha to cover over something like this.
Yeah.
With that same thing with inset, using box shadow inset to cover the whole of this area.
Yep.
But I don't have a transparency. But now I can connect this up to my variable, which is text in this case, which is the darker purple. And then all I need to do is to put the / here. And then
You've got it down to 85%. Yeah.
Exactly. So I can put alpha on things which I haven't set as my globals and use those all the way through. So when I change colors, then it honors that color as well. And that would be the same with the dark mode, which I didn't do it because of the lack of support. 89%. It's obviously going to increase as older browsers die out. But yeah, I think it just allows this room for being able to set up some sort of creative starting sites.
Yeah, it's really creative. I think that's absolutely fascinating. The way that that's implemented. Yeah, maybe there's some videos just about that.
I think you could do a lot. I mean, if you don't have any resources, just putting a background image that shows what you're doing, somebody cutting hair, and then something that doesn't have it. And with techniques like this one, now makes it a lot easier. But so before, well, there's lots of different ways you can put a sort of a gradient or something like this over the top. But I think using this box shadow inset is one. There's also a very cool new way, which I think I'll put down here, with using border image. Can you believe you fill the border image and you can use a
linear gradient?
Yeah, so I could swap this out just to show how that is. Let's have a look. Which one was that doing? If I swap this out, this might look horrible. It didn't work. It didn't work because I copied too much over, didn't I? Let's just see. I've just messed it all up. Hold on. It's arguing
quickly. Back out. There you go. Yeah, I think you did.
Yeah. Let me just try that one more time. No, that's the same one. I didn't copy the whole thing. That's my problem.
There you go. Try again.
I don't.
In that line, that's what you want.
Yeah,
that's quite nice, isn't it? I see. 90 degrees. And you've taken from.
I haven't put opacity on this one, but yeah, if I put this down to a transparent or something, then that would show through. But yeah, it's a border image is another way of being able to sort of with a one liner be able to overlay some color scheme over
border image of fill. Right, got it.
Yeah.
Undo.
Yeah, because you had to get into all that nonsense with an overlay of sort of generated content and absolute position and things over the top here. Another way would be to do it with grid as well. Let me just go back again.
Yeah, I was going to say there. Where you started. Great.
Anything else I wanted to cover here?
I don't know. Relative colors you've done. Hide and reveal component. Oh, okay. Yep.
I was talking about with scrollers. That's because we're thinking of the boxes, but when you were saying about not having enough content, we could even something like on your bottom tabs, using something like the details and summary thing would allow you to hide a lot extra text in the same. It'd have to be at the bottom of the design, or at least a box that's sat on its own because it would drag everything down. But I think there's lots more could be done with the Bento's box in that way. I do think this is what I would like to check on it, and I haven't done. Start to use container queries more for all of this.
Okay. What are you thinking about there?
Well, because everything that I'm doing the sizing is based on the viewport width, but it might as well be within.
Might as well be within the actual main container itself.
Yeah, it does seem like that, and I haven't done it yet, so I think I'll start converting anything that is a viewport into a container query and start to play around with that.
Okay.
There was something that caught my eye, and I can't remember who did this. I think it might be Adam Argyle, it might be Bramus Van Dam, but I've got it in my code, so I'll just show you some fun you can have with this. I think this is only on Chromium browsers at the moment, but we can add some animation to this. So
nice. Go on, let's see.
Block. It has to be a bit subtle with this, but Sure, it's on my top now. Hold on. Card. Here we go. Bento's animation. It's there. I've just commented it out.
Commented that
So
one out. Okay.
I don't know if you got to see this very well like that. But to drag this right out. No, you can't see it because the viewport width. If I go and bring up, oh, you can't see it there, can you? Yes, you can. I tell you what, 1 second here.
Mm-hmm.
I will just go and no. Hold on.
It's all right. Take your time.
Bear with.
In the end. Bear with. Bear with. There you go. Local
Let's
host.
do this. All right. So now we can see a slight subtle fade in.
Oh,
Just
yeah, I
because
see
that's
it. Yeah, on the
there.
prices and the services.
Yeah.
You can see it particularly. Yeah.
And if I just go and another thing that I mean, you can play around with lots of different things. If you could be put in a keyframe.
Oh,
can
translating across the X. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, so you could just combine them and have a little bit
Oh,
of
yeah, there it is. Very subtle.
movement
Yeah.
in. I mean, which probably, let's have a look on mobile. Probably has a nice as it's
Yeah, there's something to. Yeah, there's something there, isn't there?
Doing the boxes
No
there.
doubt, somebody with a little bit of thought could make great use of that. Keeping it subtle, I guess, is the point. But it you could detect it, but it wasn't over the top, was it? It was almost like, oh, did something happen there? Yep.
Yeah, and it's an add-on. So I mean, it's a progressive enhancement, if you like. I mean, I think the rest of them will come on with this, but otherwise they get the same thing. I will just mention this because I put it down as the notes. One thing to possibly what it shows like, I mean, how you could set this up as a starter site to go. You could start to use, as I'm doing on this example here, where you have basically a grid arrangement. Now, this isn't using cards here, but we're using the new has selector, often called the parent selector, to be able to decide the styles or the layout in this case according to what is contained within that container. So this is literally doing that. So if this has 4 items, it gives you this layout with
Sort of like a traditional blog layout almost, isn't it? Sidebar and main content.
Yeah. But the point what I'm trying to say is that the layout, the grid
has
that
4
I set
things.
up, yeah. So it's arranged in this way, but as soon as I put 5 items in, it changes
It goes in
the
that way. So
arrangement.
in effect, it creates a second sidebar, but it doesn't have to be a sidebar. It could be anything, couldn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it just rearranges it. If I just bring up can I just do this with the inspect here so you can see? I don't know if it's going to show me what I want you to see. Yeah. So basically what's saying here is it's looking out for my nth child here.
Child. Yeah.
And it's giving me a different arrangement, a different grid layout, depending on the content that's put in. So I stick another div in and it goes, okay, it wants this arrangement, not that one. So it's potential to do that. I think maybe more work than I'll get into, but with, that's part of the idea that you could set this up. So if you wanted another unit, I've already got it ready to go, that it will automatically jig these around.
Yeah, so a scenario where you don't have to think about that. Okay, I'm just going to drop another section in, and now I don't have to worry about the overarching because the code is going to know that this now has 7 bits.
Yes.
Then it's going to take care of that design. And I guess on a site where there's more pages adopting a bento type situation, that might work quite well because you don't have to think about the overall design. You do that at the beginning. 2 will look like this, 3 will look like this, 5 will look like this, 6 will look, and so on. Set that up, and then you can just keep adding content, and it'll just take care of itself.
Exactly. This is set up for 7, I think. So if I was to go back into the code, oops, just grab my screen back from hiding. So if I just go back to the composition over here. So yes, I mean, it would be setting this up to look out for the fact that because it's really as simple as that bit of code there.
Yeah.
You could set up a whole bunch of arrangements for the different scenarios where you've got 7 boxes, 8 boxes, 9 boxes, and have that as a starter thing using has to dictate which you do. I don't know. It could just speed up building websites.
Especially if you've got that as a sort of template that you bring in right at the beginning. You've set that up as some sort of template before you and every project starts with that as the basis, and you could tweak it from there.
I
Interesting.
I think there's a good use for it if you use has. For example, if you get has to, if it has an image or something
Yep.
that you put in, it makes the arrangement so that first image you put in is on the top of a post, or that it's already styled to go. And if you don't have it, then it's got an alternative style for when it's just a header without an image above it, that kind
Yeah.
of stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway,
I
I think
understand.
yeah. So I probably, let me check, because last time we did something, I
We
missed
missed
out one of the
something.
key thing,
Oh, did
but I
you?
don't think so.
So you got no, I think you've covered all of that. I'm looking at it on my screen over here in a different window, and I think we covered everything. It looks like we did.
Yeah. So
Okay.
really all I wanted to do, just experiment and share some of the kind of new CSS stuff, which makes you kind of really think about what you could and couldn't do with kind of design and what you could set up. So
Yeah, and I guess Bento is a perfect receptacle for doing that. So, as always, I guess this will drop as a YouTube video, and anything that was in the Google Doc as a link, David will drop into the show notes. Is that right? Is that what you're planning to do?
I'll stick them actually with because I'll stick them in the info page
Okay.
for the site that goes with this.
Okay. So just if you're in the YouTube comments, you'll be able to link to that and so on. So everything will be just there. No intuition necessarily of what we're going to do next time just yet, but yeah, we'll be back in some random amount of time between now and
Well,
who knows when.
hopefully I've improved this. And what we can do is we can apply this, what we've learned from this bento box, or what I'll continue to learn from it, to the next redesign we'll do on somebody's site. So we'll pick somebody, I think maybe somebody like a landscape gardener with lots of different jobs they do, or something. See
Oh,
how
right. Okay. Yeah. Like we mentioned, another trade and see
yeah,
what fits in. So
yeah.
yeah, that'll be interesting because it'll give us a different perspective on the same idea, but with a different kind of industry or what have you. Okay. In which case, shall we say sayonara for now? I'll see you next
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks,
Cheers.
David.
Bye.
Take it
Bye.
easy. Bye. Bye. Bye.